The balcony was ours. The Riviera was a boutique hotel pretending to be a memory. It had velvet on its elbows and a chandelier that loved to be looked at. I worked nights at the front desk, the hours when strangers admit what day it is and the ice machine sings in a language only housekeeping understands. My name is Miles. My job was a list. Clear the audit, count the drawer, stop a bachelor party from reinventing gravity, and smile like the sun kept its spare key in my pocket. At home there was Reese, who wrote features for a city magazine that treated gossip like anthropology. He slid interviews across our kitchen table the way other people slide their hands, carefully, with hope. He kept his voice soft when he was angry and his mouth careful when he wanted to be brave. We were the kind of couple that made other couples speak in future tense. We had different nights. Mine belonged to luggage and late check-ins, his to deadlines and light from the laptop that pretended to be a window. We met in the kind of crowd that believes in handshakes and second drinks. He said he loved the way I carried time like a tray, balanced, invisible. I said I loved the way he pronounced the names of streets as if they were people he had forgiven. We moved in together after a summer that smelled like rain and heat so polite, you only noticed it when it left. In our apartment, the radiator hissed like a rumor and the balcony gave away too much sky. Reese kept plants that survived on attention. I gave him mornings I stole from sleep. If you want to understand us, you have to understand our rules. We wrote them on an index card taped to the fridge because we wanted something humble to keep us honest. No afters without names and minutes. Compliments open no doors. Hands belong to what they're holding. We said the words at the sink, laughing like people who believed we were immune to the plot. We were wrong, but in the way people are wrong when they're practicing. The season that changed everything started with a conference. The hotel rented out its ballroom to a lifestyle brand that sold reinvention as a color. The attendees wore linen and the kind of smiles that confess how much they cost. Among them was a guest I recognized from Reese's stories, Ashton Vale, a photographer whose work made lips look like alibis. Ashton had a following and a mouth that made other mouths happen. He checked in at 12:03 a.m., carrying his camera as if it had a passport you couldn't stamp. He was traveling with a man named Julian who did what good assistants do, stayed 2 steps behind, noticing what no one else could afford to. Julian was tall in a way that made hallways flirt. He wore a chain too simple to be anything but a decision, and a cologne that made the elevator consider itself a church. He smiled at me like the hotel was a person he planned to forgive. I asked for ID because that's what the screen told me to do. He slid me his card with the practiced wrist of someone who's never dropped a glass. When he signed the registration card, his handwriting looked like a secret no one would begrudge him. Ashton wandered off to the velvet couch that pretended to be a confidant. Julian leaned on the desk like a dare on break and asked if the balcony rooms faced the river. I told him they did, and he said, "You make it sound like the river keeps promises." I said, "Only the boring ones." He laughed, the kind of laugh that thinks it's alone. No one cheats in a lobby, they rehearse. Reese met Ashton 2 days later at the hotel bar for an interview about fame that didn't hate itself. I watched from the desk the way a person watches a window like it's also a mirror. Reese wore the blue shirt that made his shoulders look like a confession. He took notes with a pencil because he likes the way erasing looks honest. Ashton answered questions with his hands. Julian watched everyone else watch Ashton. I learned the shape of jealousy that night. Not explosion, but a small burn under the skin asking for names. When Reese came home, he kissed me in the doorway like he had negotiated for it. We undressed with a care that had nothing to do with being tired. He smelled like juniper in a room that costs more than we pay for a month. In bed he asked if I'd seen them, meaning Ashton and Julian. I said I had. He asked what I thought. I said fame looks better on people we don't have to forgive. He laughed into my chest. He said it was good to talk to someone who didn't need him to be shiny. The first lie was a phone charging in the wrong room. It was Reese, on the nightstand by the front door as if it wanted to hear someone leave. I picked it up to move it and the screen woke with a message preview. Loved your question about want. Drinks later. Jay Reese walked out of the bedroom shirtless, sleep still adjusting his face. Interview follow-up, he said before I could ask. He wants a quote on record. He put a hand on my waist and the phone in his pocket. I believed him because saying no that early felt like giving away a good line. At work, Julian started coming downstairs late after Ashton had gone up, as if the elevator were a curtain and he needed one more bow. He would ask for a bottle opener and then not need it. He would ask what time the gym closed and then go to the balcony instead. He stood there the first night when the faithless neon from the diner across the street pretended to be moonlight. He looked at the river like it owed him something. He caught me looking and said, "You must have 100 stories." I said, "I prefer the ones I don't get to tell." We learned how to look without being seen. It's an art and it's an addiction. Reese came home smelling like the bar again. I felt his hands on my shoulders in the hall by the laundry and wanted him before I could decide not to. We made out against the dryer like people who had forgotten there were rooms where a bed had been invented. He slid his mouth over my throat in that way that says both wait and don't, and my knees argued. He was better when he moved like he was choosing me. That night he moved like he was choosing a story he planned to survive. You want an affair to be a clean line. This one was a knot that wanted to learn to tie itself. Reese got the quote on record and then he got drinks off it. Ashton liked being adored. Julian liked watching adoration ricochet. Reese liked being necessary. I liked being home. The night we crossed the balcony line, it was raining in a way that convinced the street to be quiet. Julian came down with a room key that wasn't his. "Spare," he said, and the word felt like a shirt that fit. He asked if the hotel had an ironing board as if he didn't know what service was for. I brought one up because the desk was dead and I wanted to be wrong about this. In the room, Ashton's shoes were pointed at the bed like accusations. Julian put the key on the dresser and the iron on the board and said, "You know your job better than anyone I've seen in a year." I said, "You don't have to flirt with me to tip me." He stepped into my space without touching it. "What if I don't want to tip you?" he said. "What if I want to owe you something I can't pay back?" There are sentences that rearrange a room. That one did. I didn't kiss him. He didn't kiss me. Something worse happened. We admitted we wanted to. Reese found out about the ironing board because the world wanted to be dramatic. He came in later than usual, hair damp with rain that didn't belong to our street, and asked if I had gone upstairs for a guest. I said I had. He waited like a door you haven't decided to slam. I told him everything that did not happen. He put his hands on my face like he was checking for a pulse. We slept angry because it was easier than being interesting. What makes a betrayal bearable is detail. Without detail, it's only shape. Reese's voice changed 2 days later when he said Julian's name. It softened by a degree a stranger might not notice. I met Julian on the service elevator that afternoon, just big enough to teach people politeness. He said, "He's brave, you know," and the pronoun did not need a noun. I said, "He's mine," because possession is what people say when they are auditioning for grief. The hotel hosted a closing party for the conference, as if the city needed another reason to wish for quieter shoes. Reese came because his story needed a last paragraph. Ashton came because applause does not refill itself. Julian came because he had never learned how not to. I worked the desk and watched the room like it was my mouth. At midnight, Reese asked me to come upstairs for a minute as if the room wanted me. In the halfway light near the ice machine, he leaned against the wall like it owed him a sentence. I kissed him, he said, and I learned there is a difference between knowing and knowing. The world was very clear and very small. I thought I owed myself a mistake, he added. We stared at each other with the fairness people reserve for strangers. I said, "Did the kiss feel like my mouth?" And he said, "It felt like a question," and I said, "Then you should stop answering it." I left him in the hallway with the ice machine, reminding him that water is loud when it refuses to be a river. You could end it there and call it literature. We didn't. He came home. We slept on opposite edges of a bed that had never learned to be large. In the morning, he made coffee with his apology muscles. I stood at the balcony and considered the sky like a witness. "Do you want me to go?" he asked, not whispering, not brave. I said, "I want you to choose something you plan to keep." He said, "I choose you," in a voice that knew choosing isn't winning. We decided not to change the locks. We decided to change how we touched. Being faithful after an almost is a different marriage than the first one. It is mostly maintenance. We stopped saying yes to the kinds of nights that made us interesting. Reese wrote a piece about ethics that didn't feel like punishment. Ashton moved on to someone else's friend. Julian sent me a message that didn't need to be sent. We could have, it read. I didn't reply, which was its own sentence. 3 months later, I saw him in the lobby on someone else's arm and felt nothing valuable break. People asked how we survived the kind of winter that ruins people who like themselves. We told them we got boring on purpose. We told them we kept our hands on what they were holding. We told them the balcony wasn't ours, but the door was. They smiled until the conversation needed verbs. Sometimes we still walk past the hotel when the light is kind. I tell Reese about the guests whose names the city will never know, the way secrets can be tidy if you give them good closets. He tells me about interviews that became confessions and the way you can love someone without wanting their phone. We sleep with the window open when it's almost spring. The radiator sometimes applauds us by being quiet. You want the scene where I describe how he touches me now, as if that were proof. I could tell you about the way his mouth waits like a question it already respects. I could tell you about how his hands, formerly careless, now move like they intend to be believed. I could tell you how we learned to close our eyes and open what mattered. But the sex isn't the point. The point is that the next morning I can stand on the balcony and look at a sky that belongs to both of us and feel neither stage nor audience under my feet. Maybe the intrigue was never Julian's or Ashton, or the way the city kept trying to sell us back ourselves. Maybe the intrigue was us, rehearsing exits, negotiating lines, practicing how to walk past a mirror that wants to be a window. We didn't change the locks because we learned not to be interesting to the wrong rooms. We did the maintenance. We washed the shirt with the red wax. We moved the bowl for keys to where the light looks best. We kept the love we could afford and amused ourselves by refusing the kind that wanted applause. If you're waiting for a twist, here it is. The balcony wasn't ours, but the door always was. We use it together now, and when someone reaches for my face for the shot, I move 1 inch and smile like the river knows my name, because I chose the one person who learned along with me that cameras don't tell the truth. People do, if they intend to live with it.